Are we on here? Okay. I think we're ready to start the Ways and Means Committee. Are we online over here for streaming? All right. Well, welcome. Monday, January 3rd, 2022. Happy New Year to everyone. This is the Ways and Means Committee at 3:30 p.m. or it's 3:31. We will start with a call to order, and next is approval of minutes. So I need a motion to approve the minutes. Allison, or Groves Allison first, and Blair seconds. Any adjustments, comments, changes that we need to make to the minutes? All right, seeing none. Those in favor with the sign of aye. 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 Those opposed with nay. All right, passes unanimously. We'll move into informational items. The first is the county clerk's report, which is in your packet, and we'll ask Ms. Parker to come up and add any commentary to it. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I don't have anything to add to the report that you all currently got in your packet. So, Happy New Year to everyone, and I hope our numbers keep going in the direction they've been going over the past year.
Yeah, this year your numbers were very strong. I really appreciate the work and the efforts. Any comments or questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Next, we will move to County Elections Commission and Mr. Bride. Welcome, Tom.
Hello. I don't have a lot of report. We're in the process of redrawing the precincts in the city, in the county of Peoria. We have to have that done by the 14th, but actually we'll have it done by next Tuesday, hopefully. There was one change in the size of the precincts, up to 1,200 registered voters per precinct, so we're taking that into account, although there's some other limitations on that. Otherwise, we just finished up the year. We obviously have a resolution for today that we can talk about at that point. There is some legislation possibly moving. I'm supposed to have a meeting tomorrow, I won't be able to make. Not very much of a change. There's a couple things that cleans up dealing with vote by mail, and then also dealing with election judge pay. We'll see if anything moves. I'll be surprised if much comes out of the Springfield on election related, just because of the compressed time frame, but that is a discussion that is happening with the Clerks Association. So if anybody has any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Bride? Okay, thank you. We will now move to Supervisor of Assessments Board of Review, Mr. Dave Ryan. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Don't have too much to report. We just got some year-end stuff. As I said last time, we were finishing up. The board of review should be finished up in January, and then we'll get that information sent down to the state. So we'll finish up 2021. A couple of year-end things that we did accomplish. There was about 5,700 senior frees that were renewed for 2021. There was over 1,000 disabled veterans exemptions that were worked through in 2021, and about 14,000 senior exemptions were also processed in 2021. So that is some of the main exemptions that we have, other than owner-occupied, etc. That number will still go up a little bit because the state does allow us to go back 1 year. So any individuals that forgot to file, they still can do that for 2021 for certain exemptions, which is basically the senior freeze exemption. They let us go back for that. But other than that, as I said previously, we had 451 board review complaints, of which 253 were commercial. And we'll wait and see how many of those actually go on to the state for hearings. As I said, the state cases are usually running about a couple years behind. And we're seeing about 300 to 400 cases down at the state level right now that is being worked by either the local assessors or our board of review currently. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? All right. Thank you, David.
Yeah, we do have the Board of Review Chairman Greg Fletcher is here also in case there's
Yep.
any questions regarding Board of Review, so. Okay.
All right.
All
Thanks
right.
for coming,
Thank you.
David. All right. Well, thank you. We will now move to the treasurer report. Ms. Bjorky.
I don't have a whole lot to report. We are done with taxes now. The final distribution was made and the interest distribution was made. Now it's just a matter of cleaning everything up and getting ready for the external auditors to come in. That's it.
Pretty short and brief.
I
We'll
like
take
those.
that. Any questions for our treasurer? All right. Thank you. The Veterans Assistance Commission, Mr. Brooks was not able to be here. He did send out a report earlier today for those who would have read their email. He did a year-end report for the state of Illinois for the Veterans Assistance, and there was a broadcast on WMBD TV last week of some of the work they're doing. So just want to shout out to them for the work they're doing for our veterans. Any questions or comments from the committee on this topic? All right. Seeing none, we will move to item 4, a joint resolution. It's the Election Commission Budget Amendment. It's a joint resolution with the Finance, Audit, and Legislative Affairs Committee. So I need a motion to put this on the floor. Mr. Fennell first, and Ms. Relaford second. Okay, so as this is on, I would like to invite Mr. Bride to come up and add some commentary around it. And then we'll take discussion questions before we take a vote.
So this is the final step in the process. The Election Commission we recognized several years ago and started having discussions, but we recognize that the current voting system we have is at an end of life. We cannot get replacement parts that are new. Any replacement parts we get are used replacement part for the system. We've got operating systems that are outdated and are no longer supported. The system was purchased, it was first used in March of 2016, so we got 15 years of use out of the current voting system, but it is in need of replacement. So we went out for a request for a proposal in August. We received 2 responses from it. In the state of Illinois, there are 4 systems that are certified to 4 companies that are certified to have certified systems in the state of Illinois. In the state of Illinois, it requires, it's a little misleading. It doesn't require US EAC certification, but it does require state certification, which requires the same laboratories that do the certification for the EAC to certify them. So even though theoretically it doesn't need US EAC certification, the system every system in Illinois has gone through that same certification process before it came to Illinois. And then there's additional certifications done at the Illinois level. So we did receive 2 responses, one from Hardin or Civic, which is actually our current vendor, and one from ES&S, which is the largest vendor in the United States. We did receive a response from one of the other vendors, basically saying that they were not going to be responding to the RFP primarily because of not being able to meet the requirements of the cumulative voting, the fractional cumulative voting that's required for the city council at large races in the city of Peoria. We had an evaluation committee, bipartisan evaluation committee, a couple members of the county board, Chairman Ranker and board member Sharon Williams. We had 2 members of the election commission board. We had election commission staff. We had a representative from county IT to help on the technical edge. We went through an evaluation of the responses to the RFP, the actual written responses. Then we had both vendors come in and give a 4 or 5 hour presentation of their system. and then the evaluation committee then got back together, went through the scoring matrix that we'd put together, and the unanimous selection was the Hart Intercivic system. It won 9 out of the 12 categories. It won 9 of those. The other one was a tie. We thought it was clearly the best choice. That selection was taken to the Board of Election Commissioners in November. They approved the selection of it. So that was the selection of the voting system, which is part of this budget amendment. That would be the $918,104 for the new voting system. And then during the vendor selection, we wanted to we didn't want to make too radical a change in the voting system. Right now we're electronic, and the new system will be a paper system, but one of the things that we've always liked about the system we have is when you go in, we're working with our electronic poll books, and the selection of the ballot is made sure that it's tied to the voter through the voting system, so that the election judges doesn't have to sort through a whole stack of ballots to make sure the voter gets the same one. So what we were looking at was some type of ballot on demand that we have now. The Hart system came with 2 proposals, one which was a complete ballot on demand and one which was a ballot on demand for early voting. That's the selection we made, but we also, in working with our current electronic poll books vendor, VR Systems, realized that we could do the ballot on demand on election day using existing technology that we have. The existing electronic poll book that we had could be upgraded to do that. So that's the second component of that $326,734. That will upgrade our electronic poll books to allow us to do print on demand. And really the way we're approaching this is that's all an upgrade to the voting system. They're going to work hand in hand, and that electronic poll book, once the voter's checked in as they are now, the only additional step is they'll hit a button and it'll print that voter's ballot that they'll mark by hand, and then it'll go into a scanner. So that's why there's 2 line items on the upgrade. It's the actual new physical voting system, and physical and software, and then an upgrade to the existing electronic poll books. I did hand out a brochure, and if you could go to, I wanted to give you some type of visualization. If you could go to about the page 4 and 5. On page 5 are the 3 components, the physical components of the voting system. There's Verity Print. That would be used in early voting locations to print the vote-by-mail ballots. There's the Touch Writer, which is the accessible ballot marking device, and a Verity Scan, which is when the voter is done voting, either using the accessible device or hand marking their paper ballot, they'll put it into the scanner. So on election day, you'll see the Touch Writer and the Verity Scan in each of your polling places. In early voting, you'll see the Verity Print. On page 4, there's kind of a visualization. That would be an early voting location, but also on Verity, on election day, that Verity Print selection would be our existing electronic poll books with a printer attached to it to print your ballot on demand. I guess I'll stop there, and if you have any questions for me.
Any questions from the committee on this, Mr. Fennell?
So on easy ballot marking on page 4, will they physically take a ballot from those stations and then go over to the ballot scanning booth?
So the accessible, the Touch Writer, they'll actually use, there's a couple ways they can do it. They can use a touch screen to do it. It allows you to blow up the screen, but they'll actually vote on a touch screen, and then it'll physically print their ballot, so it looks exactly like everybody else's ballot, except it'll be filled in based on their selections on that screen. And that ballot also goes in the scanner, yes.
Does it electronically go?
No, they're using the device to make their selections, and then it's printed the ballot.
They have to physically grab it and go over to that verifier.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that the evaluation committee liked about this is that everybody's ballot's going to be the exact same ballot. If you vote by mail, if you vote on election day, if you vote early, if you use an accessible machine, you're not going to be able to tell the difference in how that ballot was voted, with the exception of it's going to be a perfectly filled in square on that accessible device. But other than that, the ballots all look the exact same.
But I think that the key is that the majority of the voters will mark their ballot with a pen, physically mark their ballot and take it to the scanner to scan it through to record their vote. The accessible device will be used for those people who need a device for ADA compliance, and that would be at each voting place. But we don't expect that to be a high utilization. We expect that to be only for the people that need the accessible voting. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, theoretically, anybody can vote on it, but the device is designed to deal with people with disabilities, whether it's vision, whether it's hearing, whether it's even motor skills. There's different ways to vote on it. But that's the accessible device that we're required to have by the ADA in each voting location.
I don't know, it seems to me like a step back from what we're presently doing, where you type it in and you push and you don't mark anything except with the little box. And then when you read your ballot, you say it's approved, and you approve it, and it goes on. Seems like we're going backwards.
I had that same discussion a few months ago, Mr. Fennell. And it looks like you're going backwards, but it's creating a paper ballot, so those do get retained.
But we had a paper ballot in the other system.
It is, how should I say it? It is slightly going backwards, but every system available now to the current standards is a paper-based system.
And the other thing I dislike is physically taking a ballot and then having to put it in another spot rather than electronically push it over to that scanner. I don't know. It seems like going backwards to me. I can't remember the last time I actually had to put an X or something on a ballot.
Well, I will tell you this. We had 35% of the people vote by mail in 2020, so they all filled out a paper ballot. So, and I know it does seem backwards, but there's some security with a paper ballot, but we don't have there's two reasons that we can't really go with this type of system we have now. One of them is there isn't a system certified in Illinois that way. All of them are going to print out a paper ballot that's going to go into a scanner. Second of all, the cost.
What's the reason for the scanner versus having electronically push the button and go in?
There's a lot of concern about electronic voting. And so what ended up happening, less in Illinois, but in other states, especially after 2006, is most states started to go back to a paper-based, basically a scanner, a ballot going into it. We were only one of 2 jurisdictions in Illinois that had the all DRE. Pretty much everybody else has a paper-based system. Now they'll have an accessible unit, and some counties have more than that, and so more people vote on it than just people using accessibility. But the main reason was to go back was the auditability of it and the security of having that physical ballot.
So then the paper copies will be stored in that thing also?
Yes.
Once you slide it in, electronically scan it, and then store the paper copy?
Yeah, we'll be using to count the ballots will be electronic. That scanner will still, it images the whole ballot and we'll count off that. We have the paper to go back to for which we'll have to do it. We have to do an audit after each election of a certain percentage, so we'll do that. But also if there's any type of recount, we'll go back to the physical ballots and do those.
Will the ballots be any way serialized so that they can't have that same ballot used twice, or prove that?
So in Illinois, we're not allowed to turn that function on to have it so you can't read the same ballot. So we have to go off count. So if 100 people vote in a polling place, and the nice thing is with the electronic poll books, we'll have electronic vote a record of every ballot that was issued to who, so at least ballot style, so that we can say, okay, there were 100 ballots issued, there were 20 of this one and 40 of this one and 20 of this one, and go back and make sure that matches exactly what was tabulated.
It just seems like all you got to do is pull so many out and then feed this same one back through. I mean, it could be fraud. It just doesn't.
Yeah, but you understand, like I said, if 100 people vote, if we check 100 people in a polling place, then we're only going to have 100 ballots.
That's right.
And once they go in, that ballot box is locked.
Okay.
I know this is backwards, but probably 80%, 90% of the country votes exactly this way with paper.
It seems like we're going backwards to me.
Okay, Dr. Blair?
I have to imagine, though, that there are a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with that, hitting the little dial and pushing things, and knowing that the printout mattered. I think having something physical that you take over and put into a scanner is going to make more people feel comfortable. So I'm all for it. It makes sense to me that I think more people have comfort with that. I like the little printout thing, you know, makes me feel satisfied, but.
You could always see what your ballot was in the old system. Then you verified if you wanted to change it, you could change it.
I gotcha. I'm just thinking that more people are going to feel comfortable with this than the other system. It sounds like to me.
Okay. Any other questions? Phil? Could you use a mic, Phil, just so we capture? Thank you.
The technique that we're going to use. What percentage of the people in Illinois are using the same company?
I think they have 5 or 6 counties right now. They have, there was a system we selected. They still have Kane County on the old system. DuPage County just awarded theirs to the 3rd largest jurisdiction in Illinois. And then they have 2 or 3 smaller counties that are using this system too.
Rachel?
Can you explain a little bit more as far as what this will mean for people electronically voting in, mail-in ballots?
So the process on mail-in ballots really doesn't change with an upgrade to the system. The way that system works now is we'll still print those ballots, mail them out to them when it comes back in, and most of this is the exact same process. It's checked in, the signatures verified by election judges. When it gets to the tabulation part, really all this system, the upgrade is doing is replacing a 15-year-old scanner with a new scanner that's actually faster. There's a lot more reporting we can do with this system than we could with the other one. One of the other things that we found during the evaluation, and I think was one of the strengths that we liked about it, is that the security built into this system is very user-based. So even if there's 2 PCs sitting there, you come up, you may pull up the tabulation software, but you can't access something else without logging out and logging back in. The software is extremely locked down to the point where if we even wanted to upgrade it, we wouldn't have the ability to upgrade it ourselves anyway. It's redundant and it's all encrypted on the hardware. But the actual process is pretty much the same as we've got now. It's just we're using newer equipment and a new set of software that will still do. It's a major upgrade on the software side, but it still just counts, and we're still using commercial off-the-shelf scanners to do that. That was one of the other things we liked about this system is the other version had a purpose-built scanner. This one is a commercial off-the-shelf scanner. The nice thing about that is for half of what that other one was, we're getting 2 scanners, so we're already building redundancy into the system in case one of them goes down. Plus, like I said, we can go get another one of those scanners if we needed to. But the process really isn't changing at all for vote by mail. It's the same that we've had. We're just changing a little bit of the equipment.
Jennifer?
For those voting in person or early voting, will there be like an education campaign so that nobody's too intimidated by the new process? Step 1, step 2, step 3, something like that?
Sure. We've already had discussions with Gretchen. We plan to do a lot of voter education and outreach in the next 6 months. with an actual scanner and ballots so people can walk up and, you know, I don't know that we do have to do a lot of education on filling in squares, but putting it into the scanner and doing that, yeah, we plan to do a lot of outreach, a lot of media and that kind of thing, but also some voter education just in general talking about it. I anticipate we'll have some YouTube videos and those kind of things that we've done in the past. You know, in 2020, we did some of that stuff talking about vote by mail because it was new to people. The same thing, this is a change. It isn't it's a dramatic change, but to Jim's strength, going backwards, we're not training anybody. Everybody's filled out a piece of paper, so that helps from that standpoint. But yeah, we definitely are planning to do a lot of outreach and a lot of education on the new system.
Any other questions from the committee?
Do you want to have a special day to train we on the county board?
Sure, I can actually bring a device to a meeting and let you guys fill out a ballot and scan it if you want to. One thing I did want to touch on, I think I have that. So the resolution today is just for a capital expenditure, and that's the purchase purchase of the new voting system, and then the upgrade to the electronic poll books. But ongoing, one of the things that we've negotiated, and we're still negotiating, is that we wanted cost certainty for the next 10 years for license and support and warranty for both the electronic poll book and the voting system. And so during the negotiations, we were able to get that. And one of the nice things about that is, to give you an idea, in the second year, the license and support and warranty for both the voting system and the electronic poll books will be $108,290. That's in our budget each year, so we won't be coming back. That's something that's been in our budget. To give you an example, this year that same line item was $141,000, and we never, even at the end of 10 years, we're still less on license and support and warranty for the replacement system and electronic poll books than we have been for the last 3 years on the system we currently have. I just wanted to give some type of balance. One of the nice things is that we wanted to get that cost certainty. It doesn't affect the capital request here today, but I did want you to know that we did ask for that certainty, and actually long term it's going to cost us less on a yearly basis. And that yearly cost is already built into our budget and has been going forward.
Any other questions? Mr. Fennell?
Yes, so the money has been appropriated, but just hasn't been put into the budget.
Yes, and maybe I'll ask Shauna if you would like to make some comments on that.
Sure. The system was part of the actual capital plan itself, but the money was not appropriated at the time that the budget was adopted. We had what we thought was a pretty good range, but we wanted to make sure we were actually appropriating to the penny within the budget. So that's why at committees at that time it was referenced that we'd be coming back to actually appropriate that money, which is what you're doing today. So Fund 62 is actually the capital projects fund. And so we're proposing to pay that out of that fund. And then once the 2021 audit is completed, depending on where general fund expenditures and et cetera pan out, we'll look at our reserves, and if there's a need to maybe reallocate some of that back into the capital fund at that time, then Scott said he would bring that back to the board at that time. But for now, we're just, this is to appropriate out of the capital fund.
Good question, Jim. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Junior, you're awful quiet over here. Anything from your side? All right. One more round. I want to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. All right, Rachel.
One more. In the event that there would be, for example, questions afterwards, after voting, and that we would need to go back and do anything, recount or how would the system differ from what we have currently today? What would that look like?
My assumption is that since it would all be paper ballots, that the way a discovery recount go, which is the first step, is really we count what the requester wants. And what we've seen in the past few years is that that we've looked at the paper vote by mail ballots because there was a physical ballot, and in most cases they were comfortable with the electronic vote and we didn't look at it. Some of that also has to do with time. Some of that's a strategy that they're looking at certain areas of the process because they think that's where you may see changes in or possible changes. My only assumption with this is that we'd be more likely to be hand counting some paper ballots from election day or early voting just because it's quicker and easier. That's not necessarily the case. It really is the person asking for the discovery recount is asking for certain things. So it depends on what they want to look at. I do know, like last spring, the discovery recount, the attorney for the person doing the discovery, and one of them was very clear what they wanted. They had been through several discovery recounts, and I could tell they were looking for certain things in certain areas. And in that situation, we looked at most of the vote by mail, at least in those precincts that they'd asked for, but we didn't look real close at a whole lot of that. One other change that may happen is because it's all a physical ballot and it's filled in by hand, you can see some more variation on how the machine counted it, if it's an overvote or an undervote. Now, if you put an overvoted ballot into the scanner, it's going to kick it back out and tell you, you overvoted this race. Now, the voter can go, I don't care, and put it in anyway, but if they want to vote it again, we'll issue them another paper ballot to vote. It will also tell them that there's undervotes on it, but it won't necessarily reject that ballot because there's undervotes.
Mr. Fennell.
It's kind of a rudimentary question, but when a person comes into the polling place and the judge asks who he is and identifies in his signature, so then that person somewhere in your computer system is logged that person then got a voting. So then the same thing when a ballot comes in from mail, it goes into the same, the judge takes it and it does the same thing with it, is that right?
So the way, yes. So when if you vote in early voting or election day, early voting we don't use the electronic poll books, we dial directly into our system. On election day we do the electronic poll books that have a file that was updated literally at 6 a.m. the morning of the election with the most updated, these people voted early, these people voted by mail, and have had one returned. Actually it'll show if they've been sent one, but also if one's been returned. So each individual ballot is tracked. And that process is the same too. And we can go, when you check in with the electronic poll books, either early or election day, we verify who that is. You say your name and your address, you sign it, the judges then verify the signature.
But that's not part of this system.
It is. Because there's two components here. That would still be that's still being handled the way it is now with an upgrade to the electronic poll books, because now instead of giving you that little access code to go over and put in the machine, they're going to hand you a physical ballot to vote. Unless they're using the accessible machine, then it's kind of the same process it is now, and then they fill that out and that prints the ballot. But the difference is you do the verification, and then once that verification is completed with the signature on election day or in early voting, then the voter's handed a ballot. On the vote by mail, it's the same process. When we send a ballot out, there's a record that a ballot went to a voter. And when it comes back, there's a record that it was returned. And once it's returned good, then that voter, you can't issue that voter another ballot. If they walked in on election day and they'd returned one, it'll say you returned one. If they were sent one and didn't return it, then we'd vote them provisionally on election day, because we don't want that ballot to come back on election day and be counted and they voted in the election. We allow them to vote. The provisional just means we're not going to count it on election night until we can verify that that's the only ballot.
So how do you segregate that?
With a paper ballot, it'll be physically segregated.
So that one you would count the one that came in. If another one came in, you would discard that one?
Yeah, if they voted on election day and we got a vote by mail ballot after the election, it would trigger that vote by mail ballot that person had already voted a ballot.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'd just discard that particular, because you can't identify a vote by a person.
No, but Right. Once you get to just the paper ballot, you can't identify them. But when that ballot comes back in the mail, there's a barcode and a unique identifier on each ballot envelope that allows us to identify if that was who that ballot went to. Occasionally a ballot gets lost. It may be the second issue. Sometimes we send one out 40 days. I never got it. We send another one out. We can identify all the way down to that. And each envelope has a unique identifier. Once you get to the paper ballot, you can't, because they're all that provides the privacy. But the counts are the important part there too. We know exactly how many ballots from each precinct were sent out and which ones were voted, to make sure that number matches up.
Any additional questions? I know it's a lot of detail and good questions from everyone, so don't be bashful at it. So this motion here is to amend the budget, and that way the funding is available for the election commission to go ahead and sign the contract and start the capital purchase of the equipment, and get that process rolling so they're ready for the June 28th primary. So they've got less than 6 months now to complete that, get the equipment in place, installed, validated, and then I think the company's going to work with you on the first election cycle, provide some support just to make sure it works.
The plan is that they'll do, on the project plan that they've initiated, that they'll come in and do the training of us, which includes training of the trainer, but then also election support for the first election.
All right, one more round for questions. All right, Ms. Blair, or Dr. Blair?
Either one, I'm not offended. You had mentioned bringing in a machine. Is that something that could be done for the county board meeting? So maybe right before we can play around with it?
I don't think I'll have one
By then? Okay.
by then.
But
No.
that's something in the future that maybe.
Yeah,
we can bring.
I definitely, once we get the contract signed, I've told them that it'll probably be the end of February before we start to get the actual equipment delivered, and maybe even, some of the electronic poll books then. We plan to start doing training for the election judges in March. We may not get I think we'll get all our voting equipment in by then. We may only get enough to do training of the upgraded to the electronic poll books. But as soon as we sign a contract, my intent, and they've said they're fine, is to get us kind of a demo unit so that we can show it. And that's the one reason I wanted to give out the brochure too, so you can at least, these things are suitcases. They were designed that way, and the ballot box itself folds down to real narrow. It's one of the other things that we liked about this system is they very much thought about how you get the system from your warehouse to the polling place and get it set up by judges, or if we set it up ourselves. So a lot of that part of it is built into the system too. It really does fold down to a suitcase.
Any additional questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for a vote. Those in favor of amending the budget as proposed with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed with the sign of nay? All right, that passes. Thank you. And I'd like to thank also Sharon Williams for being on that committee. I know Tom mentioned her name, but Sharon's here. I'd just like to thank you for also supporting the work. All right. We have one more resolution, the monthly resolution for properties. There's only one line item this month, so I need a motion to put this on the floor. Junior first, Phil second. Any questions on this resolution? Pretty straightforward. All in favor with the sign of aye? Aye. Opposed with the sign of nay? Okay, that's unanimous. We are now down to miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous items for this committee? Oh, no, I have one more. I'm getting the look like I missed it. I want to turn this over to the committee action review of executive session minutes I'll ask our attorney over here to give us her statement on that. Thank you.
Right, yeah, no problem. So this is your review of your executive session minutes, and it remains the advice of the state's attorney's office to hold all previously held minutes because the need for confidentiality does still exist, and to go ahead and destroy the executive session recordings that are more than 2 years old unless it relates to pending litigation.
Okay, so I need a motion to put on the floor. Mr. Fennell first, Dr. Blair second. So the motion is to approve it as presented. Any comments or questions on that? All right. All the in favor with the sign of aye. Aye. Opposed with the sign of nay. All right, that passes unanimously. Okay, now we'll move to miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous items for this committee? Seeing none, we will adjourn. Thank you.